Okay, so let's be real. We all love a good mystery, right? Secret societies, hidden knowledge, that kind of thing. Well, today we're diving headfirst into one of history's biggest enigmas, the Freemasons. And to guide us through this maze of symbolism and allegory, we're cracking open Morals and Dogma by Albert Pike.
Now, Pike was a really prominent figure in the Scottish Rite Freemasonry, and his writings, they're still studied today. Especially fascinating is the section we're focusing on, the 13th degree, also known as the Royal Arch of Solomon. Talk about a title that just screams secrets.
It really does, like a doorway to some hidden wisdom. And at the center of it all, we find this idea of the lost word. But before we get lost in the weeds, what exactly is the Royal Arch of Solomon?
Imagine a bridge connecting the everyday world with, well, something more profound, a gateway to deeper understanding. That's essentially what the Royal Arch represents for Masons. It's all about moving into higher levels of knowledge, and much of his symbolism comes straight from Solomon's temple, which is a whole other deep dive waiting to happen.
Right, like the temple itself is a symbol. Which brings us back to this lost word. It's not like they just misplaced a dictionary somewhere. This is about something way bigger, right? I mean, Pike even suggests it might be more of an allegory than a literal word. Why do you think that is?
Well, allegories were powerful tools, especially in ancient traditions. Think of them as compacting complex ideas into stories, making them easier to understand and pass down through generations. And like a good metaphor, they reveal different layers of meaning as you delve deeper, depending on, where you're at in your understanding.
It's like one of those optical illusions, see a rabbit, then suddenly, boom, it's a duck. Definitely more impactful than a single word. And speaking of words, it's interesting how the text mentions this ancient Hebrew belief that you shouldn't even say the sacred name of God out loud. Feels kind of intense.
It does, doesn't it? But this belief that names hold power, especially divine names, it wasn't unique to the Hebrews. It's like the name itself contains the essence of the thing it represents. So to say it carelessly, well, that's tempting fate.
More than bad manners, it's recognizing the weight behind a word. Wouldn't want to accidentally summon anything. Pike also brings up Aom in India, home in Persia. Is he saying these are all basically the same word, just like different accents?
It's more about a shared concept than a specific pronunciation.
Hmm.
The idea was that creation itself, the very beginning, was tied to a primordial sound, a vibration, like the Big Bang, but with, sound waves instead of an explosion.
So the lost word isn't about cracking a code, but about rediscovering our connection to that primal source. I'm starting to see why it's more of a journey than a destination.
Exactly. And what's fascinating is that even the ancient Hebrews, with all their reverence for this name, their understanding of God, it wasn't static.
Yeah.
It evolved.
You're right. It's not just about names, but about how those beliefs about God changed over time. Why is that important for understanding this whole lost word thing?
Well, if you look at early Hebrew writings, their view of God, it's often anthropomorphic, meaning they gave him human-like characteristics. It was a way to make sense of the divine in a way they could relate to.
Right, like God hanging out in the Garden of Eden wrestling Jacob. That would be an epic showdown. But those stories, they shaped how people saw the divine.
Absolutely. It was their way of explaining the world around them, God's role in it all. But the idea of a lost word, it suggests a shift from a God of stories, intervening in daily life, to a God of universal laws, of principles, something you could access through, knowledge and understanding.
So as their understanding of God evolved, so did the meaning of the lost word. And this gets really interesting because Pike points out that the masses and the enlightened few, they often had very different understandings of the divine, like there were layers to the truth.
Exactly. And this idea of different levels of understanding, it goes back to these ancient mystery schools, which Masonry has ties to. It wasn't about being elitist and keeping secrets, but recognizing that not everyone was ready for or even interested in, really complex metaphysical ideas.
Right. You got to learn to walk before you can run a marathon. So this lost word could represent that higher level reserved for those who had done the work, the preparation. So we've got this word that's not a word, but an allegory, a journey, tied to an evolving understanding of God. Where do we go from here?
This is where Solomon's temple comes into play. For Masons, it's not just a building, it's deeply intertwined with this idea of the lost word.
It's like the temple itself is a riddle waiting to be solved.
Yeah.
What's the connection between this ancient building, the universe, and this elusive lost word?
Imagine Solomon's temple as this blueprint, this microcosm reflecting the grand design of the universe. Like every detail, from the Holy of Holies to those 12 pillars, was infused with symbolic meaning, pointing towards these bigger cosmological principles.
So it wasn't just about aesthetics. There was a deeper meaning baked into every column and archway.
Absolutely. Like the Holy of Holies, right? The inner sanctum, where they kept the Ark of the Covenant, it was cube-shaped.
A cube. That seems significant.
It is. The cube, it represents stability, the element of earth, a solid foundation. It's about connecting with something fundamental.
Okay, so they're working with these layers of symbolism. What about the temple's ceiling? The 12 columns, those weren't just decorative flourishes, were they?
Not even close.
Yeah.
They're like pieces of this giant cosmic puzzle, each one hinting at a greater truth. Those 12 columns, for instance, they could represent the 12 months of the year, or the signs of the zodiac, or even the 12 tribes of Israel.
It's like they're weaving together the earthly and the celestial, finding those connections between the everyday world and the cosmos.
Exactly. It's about recognizing those patterns, those echoes of the universe that surround us. Finding the lost word is kind of like that, you know? It's about unlocking that symbolic language, being able to see the interconnectedness of everything.
It's like that aha moment when you suddenly see the connections, the patterns in things you never noticed before. Which takes us from these grand cosmic ideas to something a bit more, well, grounded. Because Pike doesn't just leave us floating in the symbolic realm, he brings it down to earth with this idea of work, of toil, as its own kind of spiritual practice. It's not just about contemplating these symbols, but about how we live our lives every single day.
You've hit on something really crucial there. Pike was really onto something with this whole religion of toil idea. It might seem counterintuitive, but think about it, creating anything meaningful, whether it's a physical structure, a work of art, or even a life of integrity. It requires dedication, perseverance, effort, and those qualities, they have a spiritual dimension to them, regardless of your beliefs.
So it's not about escaping the daily grind, but finding that spiritual connection within it.
Exactly. It's about showing up, putting in the effort, and finding meaning in the process of creation itself. And Pike even connects this idea of toil to something deeply personal, our homes and families. He suggests that it's love, those deep connections with others, that drives us to overcome challenges, to provide and protect.
It's about building something bigger than ourselves, something that extends beyond our individual needs. And he doesn't stop at the family unit. He expands outward to society as a whole. This religion of society he talks about, it's like even in those everyday interactions, there's this element of faith, of trust that we often take for granted.
Right. We're constantly relying on this unspoken agreement, this shared sense of trust, to navigate the world. Think about it. A business transaction, a handshake, it all hinges on the belief that the other person will uphold their end of the bargain. That underlying faith, that's the bedrock of a functioning society.
It makes you realize how even small acts of dishonesty or selfishness, they chip away at that foundation. Our actions, they have this ripple effect, you know? They either contribute to the collective good or they detract from it. It reminds me of the Masonic emphasis on charity and community involvement.
It's all connected. When we recognize that interconnectedness, that we're all part of this grand tapestry of human experience, that's where things get really meaningful. Our choices, our actions, they're like threads in that tapestry, contributing to the overall beauty and strength of the whole.
We've covered so much ground, the lost word, the cosmos, these symbolic temples, and now the fabric of society itself. But Pike doesn't stop there. He calls Masonry a temple of religion, and its teachings, instruction in religion. It's a bold statement, especially given the diverse beliefs held within Masonic lodges.
Right, and it's important to remember that Pike, steeped as he was in symbolism, he wasn't necessarily pushing for a specific religion or dogma when he used that word. He was highlighting those universal principles at the heart of Masonry: truth, justice, charity, brotherly love, these values that go beyond any one religion or belief system.
It's about those core values we keep circling back to, and the lodge, in a way, it becomes a space to nurture those values, to put them into practice within this community of like-minded individuals.
Exactly. It's about cultivating an environment where people from all walks of life can come together, put aside their differences, and connect on the level of these shared ideals. And through that shared pursuit, build something greater than themselves.
It's like we're all building our own inner temples, aren't we? Brick by symbolic brick. But even with all this talk of light and knowledge, Pike doesn't shy away from the darker aspects of reality, does he? He acknowledges that there's suffering, that injustice is woven into the fabric of human experience.
He definitely doesn't sugarcoat it. He recognizes that the world is complex, often messy. But amidst the darkness, he emphasizes the importance of hope, of seeing those glimmers of light, even in the toughest of times.
It's about choosing to be that light, even in those small everyday moments. It's those choices that matter, right? Choosing compassion over apathy, courage over fear.
Exactly. It's about tapping into that wellspring of goodness within each of us and realizing that even the smallest acts of kindness, they can ripple outward, creating a more just and compassionate world.
It's about being the change, right? Taking responsibility for the energy we bring into the world. But Pike doesn't let us off the hook with just good vibes, does he? He brings up this idea of a law of retribution, which sounds a little ominous. What's that all about?
It's not as scary as it sounds. It's not about some cosmic punishment, more like understanding the natural consequences of our actions. Cause and effect, plain and simple. It's about recognizing the impact of our choices, owning our part in the grand scheme of things.
So what goes around comes around.
Pretty much. But it's not about living in fear, it's about understanding. Because once you understand that your actions have consequences, you can make different choices. You can align yourself with those forces that lead to greater harmony.
It's like recognizing we're not just along for the ride, we actually get to steer. We have more power to shape our lives and the world around us than we often realize.
Exactly. It's about waking up to the impact of our thoughts, our words, our actions, even those seemingly insignificant choices we make every day.
It's about realizing that every moment, every interaction, it's all connected, part of this intricate web we're all weaving together. And speaking of intricate, for all this talk of temples and symbols and ancient wisdom, Pike ends on a surprisingly, poetic note. He starts talking about the mystery of just existing, like every breath we take is this incredible gift.
It is a beautiful reminder, isn't it? He's encouraging us to cultivate this sense of wonder, this awe at the miracle of life itself, the way our minds and bodies work, the vastness of the universe, even the intricate details of nature. There are all these invitations to just pause and appreciate the mystery of it all.
It's like he's saying, don't just walk through life. Really see it, experience it.
It's so easy to get caught up in the destination that we forget to appreciate the journey. And that's really what this whole quest for the lost word is all about, isn't it? It's not about arriving at some final answer. It's about embracing the journey, the seeking, the learning, continually refining our understanding of ourselves and the universe we inhabit.
It's about asking those big questions, wrestling with those complex ideas, and finding meaning in the searching itself, building that inner temple along the way, brick by metaphorical brick.
Exactly. It's about laying those foundations of knowledge, wisdom, and compassion. And recognizing that the blueprint for that inner temple, it's not hidden in some ancient text. It's within each and every one of us.
It's about looking inward, but also outward, seeing the interconnectedness and choosing to act in a way that uplifts, that inspires, that contributes to the good of the whole.
And never losing that sense of wonder, that curiosity, that awe at the mystery of it all.
Beautifully said. Well, there you have it, a deep dive into Albert Pike's morals and dogma, and this idea of the lost word, which, as we've discovered, is so much more than just a word. It's a call to embark on this lifelong journey of self-discovery, to connect with something bigger than ourselves, and to build a life of meaning and purpose. So as you go about your day, ask yourself what resonated with you from this exploration. What principles will you use to build your own inner temple? This is the deep dive, reminding you that the greatest discoveries are often the ones we make within.